Hey, y'all, we're back. Did you
What
miss
would we
us?
be if not 5 minutes late to a live stream,
To
right?
our
What
own
would we
live
be?
stream?
I know.
We'd like to thank you for listening to 93 point. No, we're not doing that. All the sultry voices we have up here. Ladies and gentlemen of Hashtag Nation and Bills Mafia, welcome back once again to Hashtag Sports. You can find all of our socials, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook in our link tree, as well as all of our episodes will be going to iTunes and Spotify. Sponsor of the show is Mr. Rogers Holmes. These two esteemed colleagues I have next to me, good old Paul and Ryan. We're going to talk about Buffalo Bills making some moves, what this may mean for the team overall, and we're going to probably spiral off into some other discussions where they make fun of my forehead. But other than that, I hope you guys are having a wonderful Friday evening. And throw your comments and questions in the chat, and we will be sure to get to them. But first of all, we have our formalities. Paul, actually, I'll start with our guest. Ryan, how you doing today, bud?
Oh, I'm doing, man. Doing good. Appreciate you guys having me. Paul was worried whether we'd have enough to talk about, so you guys were like, "Oh, let's call Ryan," because he has never lacked.
Yeah, when you need to kill 20 minutes, call Ryan Lace.
There you go.
I called him today. It wasn't 20 minutes, but
Ryan and I went to lunch recently, actually, and
Yeah,
And Paul kept it to a crisp hour.
I
too.
did. I was right on the money. I was sticking it between meetings at work.
I even
man.
got him to have a beer, Mario. How about
Yeah,
that? In the middle of the
that's
day
true.
on a work day.
That's true. It's allowed. It's allowed. You're allowed one.
let me see. It must be broke.
Yeah, right. So are you.
Oh, we all know you have a normal 9 to 5 teaching the future of America.
Yeah, just educating young minds. But all right, gentlemen. Well, let's first of all, Paul, how you doing, bud? You doing good?
Yeah. Let's talk Bills.
You pay the heat bill?
Listen, it's cold in my house.
Yeah.
It's just always cold. It's always cold in my house.
Yes.
And Ryan, my dude, now got a fresh setup. Look at you,
Yeah.
looking all fresh and clean.
With an awesome new desktop set, which I haven't changed yet, Paul, just for you.
You guys don't know. So
desktop.
I should have saved the picture, but I didn't. So I set
I
Ryan.
saved it.
Oh, did you?
Oh God, archives, baby, archives.
So I set Ryan's his background on his computer to Sean McDermott, and then like in Microsoft Paint, like wrote in Elite, and that's his background. I laugh pretty hard. I can't knock that.
No, not at all. So, ladies and gentlemen of Hashtag Nation and Bills Mafia, a lot of stuff going on. Not really, I don't know, for the Bills. I've been looking on Twitter, looking on the fan sites and stuff like that. A lot of people were initially upset with the lack of moves coming out of one Bills drive. But hey, when you don't have that much money on you, what are you going to do? So, interesting enough, the signing of Curtis Samuel, former Carolina Panther, drafted, as I found out today, by Mr. Ryan Laisel, drafted by Brandon Beane when he was there, and had his most successful season, one could argue, with Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator. So interesting stuff to talk about for tonight. I had a very interesting question, but I want to get these gentlemen's take on the signing and if you like it or you don't like it. So Ryan, start us off on this one.
I like it. Next.
Yeah, it's to piggyback off that great point by Ryan. It's just Curtis Samuel is, a player who ended up in the troves of Washington where good careers go to die, and through really just terrible route running, bad quarterback play, and just constant injuries, like just his time there was completely forgettable. People are going to immediately make the Isaiah McKenzie, comparison, right? Because he ran the ball in Carolina, right? Like he put up multiple rushing attempts, right? And it's just something that, hey, we didn't see jet sweeps in the offense at all this year because that was a Dable thing, not really a Dorsey thing, and you didn't see it with Brady because you didn't see the Brady things this year. We'll see what this looks like, right? But he was utilized in that capacity before. We'll see what that frames out to look like. Again, the Buffalo consistently makes these veteran wide receiver 3 signings. Last year it was supposed to be Deontay Hardy. Curtis Samuel could turn into just a really expensive kick returner for you. And I think you kind of hope that that's the way it works out, right? I think you look at it and say, we hope that we position ourselves better with younger, more affordable talent long term than to have to depend on Curtis Samuel. So is it fine for now? Yeah, it's fine for now, right? You're a better team now because of it. Okay, move on, right? It doesn't move the needle to me where I'm like, yeah, this is the year. I'm not there yet. I mean, but Mark,
Curtis Samuel's not the hump guy for you.
he's not. No, he's not. But Mar, we used to talk about Curtis Samuel in Carolina.
We did. We
You
did. I mean, we talked about a lot of Carolina guys coming over because when you start your team out and you start your program out, what do? You start with the guys you're most familiar with.
Right.
And if this was the guy that Bean stood on the table for in Carolina for him to get drafted, and he did get drafted, I mean, he had some lackluster. Well, I mean, by comparison with a lot of the other receivers that were available in this free agency period, obviously he was one of the ones you could afford. But if you look at his numbers, it's not really eye-popping for so many people. But then again, when you look at his quarterbacks that he played with, you understand why.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting enough to see 4 out of his 7 seasons, he had over 90 targets. I want to temper Bill's Mafia expectations and saying, listen, this guy's probably not going to have over 90 targets this year with the amount of weapons that the Buffalo Bills offense has. He is more than likely the only comparison that I say for McKenzie. He's likely going to be your gadget guy. He can be a slot guy. He can play on the outside. He can play on the inside. He has versatility that you didn't have at the position in that room yet, which I think is going to be a big plus for the Buffalo Bills going into 2024. Now, Ryan, does this happen to indicate anything, whether it was Bean or whether it was Brady, and anything going on at one Bills drive where there might be a shifting of the guard? Because like I talked to you earlier today, I didn't see many guys that were Dable or Dorsey guys that came in that were brought in that formerly worked with those guys. I mean, I could be wrong. Chat, you let me know. You always let me know when I'm wrong. But could this be they're giving Brady a lot of responsibility as the offensive coordinator? Because we always like to think is McDermott is that micromanager. You know what I mean? He took the reins from Frazier one game when he didn't like the defensive play calls. Is this they're giving Brady free reign to do what he wants? Or is this a former Bean guy where he's like, yeah, I drafted him. I like him for what we need right now and what our prices are in our salary cap. This is what we can go with.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at all of the factors that were working in Samuel's favor with this signing, all right, Bean last year in Carolina, they drafted him. Joe Brady, had his best season under Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator. I think what this signals is, at least what I'm hoping it signals, something that I've been wanting from Sean McDermott for the last few seasons, is to me this seems like a point in the favor of trust of Joe Brady, that maybe they did go to him and say, listen, here's a list of free agents that we've gone out and we've beat the bushes on. These are the deals that we feel like we can afford. Here's the list. Which guy do you like? We can get one. Like here's our number. We've got 4 guys on this list that we feel like we can afford. We want to spend double digit per year annual average value. These are the 4 guys that we can get. Which one do you like? I feel like there's some trust there from McDermott. And look, there's no delusions of grandeur as to what McDermott and Dable's relationship was. It was adversarial at best, from what we understand. Dorsey was a Dable guy, right? Dorsey was on because he was a Dable guy. He was Josh Allen's quarterback coach. Josh Allen wanted him to be the offensive coordinator, so they kept him when they got rid of Dable. Joe Brady, you can make the argument, is the first one that truly was a McDermott hire into this offense. McDermott hired him to be the quarterback's coach when Dorsey moved to offensive coordinator. There's some trust level there. Maybe this is the opportunity for them to pass that trust along and say, go get the guy that you want here. We can afford him. If you want Samuel versus, I don't know, insert name here. I don't know if the name was, probably not Hollywood Brown based on what he signed for, but Curtis Samuel and like Michael Thomas, like, hey, here's go get Curtis Samuel. I feel comfortable with him. I know what I can do with him. I know how to scheme him open, things like that. Hopefully it's a matter of trust from McDermott, because he's been needing to trust his coordinators. And if he goes into this season trusting his coordinators, I think that's going to make him a better head coach.
And Ryan, they were searching for a type, right? Because KJ Hamler is already on this team, right? It's a former second round pick. He's on veteran minimum, he's on his 4th season. He's played like 20 games in 3 seasons, right? I think the last 2 years he's played 10 games total.
You were a fan of him, weren't you, Paul?
It's one of those players that he was in Denver during the Drew Lock years, right? So again, but you look at type and you say Curtis Samuel, KJ Hamler, okay, right? Like you're getting pedigree there in that respect, right? Because you're you just signed a guy who was a former second round pick that just kind of toiled away and was like beat out by just pure inefficiency of the offense, multiple head coaches, multiple quarterbacks. So you're just rolling the dice. It's league minimum, basically veteran minimum. So why not? But they were clearly looking for a type. So KJ Hamler was already on this team. Curtis Samuel being signed afterwards was just like when the Bills ended up with John Brown and Cole Beasley and just went, okay. Right? Like, okay. Yeah, we'll just deal with both. But again, they were clearly looking for a type, and that's fine because one of them is bound to hit, and that's what Buffalo does, right? You often see them do things in pairs, and this is just another example. KJ Hamler, Curtis Samuel, while they are ultimately very different players, from when you look at their size, you look at their speed, they were searching for a type there.
Yeah, and I think the fact that they're signaling that they were looking for a specific type and it's not a type that they had on the roster at the time, right. Does that, Mario, I guess, to put you in the question shoes, does that signal where they may be looking for in the draft? Like what kind of wide receiver might they be looking for in the draft? Was that at all signaled by the fact that they went after a Curtis Samuel and not like a DJ Chark or Josh Reynolds out of Detroit, like a big body kind of guy? Like, are they signaling maybe they're going in that type of direction in the draft versus trying to get one in free agency?
Yeah, I'm not sure, because the one thing I think we can all is a consensus agreement that we could have as far as what happened last year when we saw other teams and the success of other teams, and what we saw with the Bills was there wasn't really a lot of separation with the wide receivers that the Buffalo Bills had. Other than Diggs, there wasn't a lot of guys on the team that can gain separation. Now, the statistics are out if you want to look it up. You just go on Twitter, you'll see some statistics. The average separation that Curtis Samuel has had when he was in Washington playing with, not very good quarterback play, he still had amazing separation. So I think that was one of the things that they were looking for. As far as Paul's point, they do things in pairs. I mean, the $1 million question is, are they going to go wide receiver 1 and 2? They've done it before with defensive ends when they had to cycle out of position. Now, you came into this offseason with just Stephon Diggs, Justin Shorter, and Khalil Shakir in a bunch of guys. That's really what you had. Now you pick up Mac Hollins, you pick up Curtis Samuel. Now it's one of those things where there's enough draft history that's going on that we could say, okay, this is what Bean likes to do. He likes getting that a little bit of insurance before the draft and maybe pick up a guy. But this isn't like picking up a TJ Yeldon for $2 million and then drafting a running back. This guy has a significant contract where he's going to be a positive contributor to your team. It could be that's the type that they go for. I'm not really sure as far as the Joe Brady offense. Now, they have to be very conscious of the fact that if you're drafting just for a specific offense and that coordinator leaves, you're in some trouble. You're in a lot of trouble. That's why we see these guys when they go to their second contract and end up having success. Guys, we saw it during the drought. Oh, the Bills had this guy and then they let him go. Well, you know what? When you switch coaches every 3 years, you switch philosophies. Mm-hmm. So that could be one of the things that does happen. I'm not sure. But as far as the type, you feel more comfortable as a Bills fan, I think, going into the draft now that you have Curtis Samuel along with Shakir and Diggs. And if something were to happen, but I still want to piggyback off Paul's point. I haven't really seen anything lately about it. I wouldn't be upset if they flipped their first round pick for Ayuk. Now you guys can tell me that's already signed.
So here's the great thing about that. The price of poker for trading for a wide receiver on a contract year, man, you're going to like the price of those, right? Because Ryan and I were just talking about this the other day, right? Like when you see players get traded for 4th and 5th round picks, that's music to your ears, right? Like if you're Brandon Bean. So at one point you could look at trading a first round pick for Ayuk and you're like, well, from a value perspective, yeah, he's in a contract year. He's going to be expensive, but you're going to get an instant impact player. You did it once with Diggs. So I think it's an easy concept to sell to Bills fans that like, hey, we've done this before. I think the difference is that there's already been multiple trades like that in this offseason. And if you're talking a third, a fourth, I mean, the Bills don't have a third round pick, but if you're talking a fourth round pick, that's very doable right now. Like that's very doable because that's what the price of these deals are right now. Teams that just know that a contract extension for that player is likely unlikely, they're just trying to get value back. Yep. And multiple wide receivers have gone for fourth and fifth round picks.
Can they make the numbers work though, Paul? Because it sounds like that's the hang up with San Francisco is Ayuk is looking at these contracts. I mean, not Jerry Jeudy. Calvin Ridley just got what, $26 million a year?
Yeah,
in that range. Deebo Samuel was $24 million. Mike Evans just got a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Like Ayuk is going to want to be in that realm. He's going to want to be in that $26-27 million a year range.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think it's
so while the trade works, you're not going to make a trade for a guy like that if he's going to be a 1-year rental and you can't afford to extend him long term. There's going to be contingencies on that trade.
Absolutely true. But you look at what the rest of that wide receiver group has. You've got Stephon Diggs and then a bunch of guys, right? Yep. Like that's really where you are. You've got no other investments. So, you got out of Gabe. I think everybody was kind of okay with that, right? I think everybody was fine with getting away from Gabe. Like Keenan Allen went for a 4th round pick. Like, you can't tell me that doesn't make your team better, at least on the whole of the team, right? So that's what I mean. Buffalo is scheming something because all these deals were there and they didn't jump on any of them, right? So what's the reason? It wasn't because you got Curtis Samuel. It wasn't, because you think Khalil Shakir is going to hit this year, right? Like you're planning something else. I just don't know what that is. There's got to be a bigger plan here because I don't think it's the receivers that are on the roster right now. There's got to be another bullet in the gun.
I agree because at the end of the day, when you look at the roster, the wide receivers on the roster, and this is kind of what I was speaking to, Mario, by bringing in a Curtis Samuel and not a DJ Chark or a Josh Reynolds, that leaves you with no legitimate pass catching wide receiver option that's taller than 6 foot, right? Like Shakir's the tallest. He's maybe 6'1", maybe, but they list him at 6 foot, so he's probably closer to 5'11". But that leaves your options that are above 6 foot at Mac Hollins, which hard pass. Justin Shorter, you don't know what he's going to look like,
right?
And then who's the other one is Tyrell Shavers, which again, who? So you don't have a big body, go get it kind of wide receiver. And I think
you can depend on. Let me just make sure that you can depend on. Right. Yeah.
Right. Because Mac Hollins may be the most dependable of them, and he's got 1 season where he has more than 18 catches. So that's not anything you can necessarily count on going into the season. So I think more so my thought process, Mario, was that because they went and got Samuel, does that mean that they're zeroing in on one of these big guys in the draft versus maybe going and getting like a smaller version of a wide receiver coming out of college this year, which there are a number of them. I mean, there's so many wide receivers in this draft. Like it's almost like just a treasure trove of wide receivers in this draft, and they're all shapes and sizes. However you want to go get one, you can go get one. If you want to get Leggett, if you want to get Coleman, if you want to get, any of the smaller guys that are out there. But I think bringing in Samuel indicates that they are looking for that big outside type wide receiver in the draft versus because otherwise they would have gone and gotten Josh Reynolds, DJ Chark, a guy that can play outside and has that big body.
But are you really happy with that? Right? Like I think last year showed you that you needed a more dominant force on the opposite side of the field from Diggs. And the thing that got me was I think they knew they couldn't afford it in free agency in time because let's just reset on that, right? Remember, Buffalo is going to get money back for Trey White. They just don't get it till June. So you miss free agency, like that money's coming. It's just not going to be here when you need it, right? Like that's just the way that is. It's how June 1st, post June 1st cuts work is the money's on the books later, right? It's like it's a post-dated check at this point.
Right.
So the money will be there for later, just not now. And that doesn't help you in this free agency class. So you were really out on a lot of guys. Now, again, that's why making a deal for a player like Ayuk. Can you afford him? Yeah, you know what? You probably can make the numbers work, right? Because at this point, you're probably still looking for a right tackle in this draft because I can't imagine that they're really thinking about re-signing Spencer Brown because right tackles again on the free agent market, he's going to make too much money to retain. So you're probably back in the pool for a right tackle. Again, your wide receiver, you have no idea. You have no other running back on this roster besides James Cook that anybody even cares about. So there's a lot of needs still at positions that can be addressed in the draft. The question is Buffalo going to roll the dice and hope that they hit on those? Because they've never done that. They've never done that. They've always addressed their problems in free agency, supplemented in the draft, and then picked a couple of the same position in the same draft class and said, well, we'll just see what happens.
Yeah, a lot of these players like to bet on themselves. I mean, the one thing that Paul sold me on with the whole Ayuk thing was the fact that true, and he said it before. You have Diggs and then a bunch of guys. Like, what are you going to do if Diggs goes down? Like, what's your contingency plan? I know you shouldn't draft or trade in case of injury, but that is a very real possibility. You know, as he's north of 30 now, and what might happen, and especially the horses that were brought in. And to your point, Ryan, with a lot of this very, very deep wide receiver class, and then you see Ridley gets a bunch of money, Davis gets a bunch of money. A lot of these other guys are getting huge contracts, and they're like, and they're not necessarily from teams that are picking in the 20s necessarily. So you're like, oh, you know, this is such a deep class. Why are these guys paying for what's already there? Do they not trust some of the guys? Did they go to the There's something, you know, it's like the whole what was the guy from draft day? The Bo Callahan thing. Like, what do these guys know that I don't know? Like, what do you know? So I think a thing about it that's more even intriguing to me about Ayuk is the fact that, would you be able to afford him? I saw in the chat, Daniel Garvey's coming. It's like, if you spend a first rounder on him, you're not able to re-sign him. That's a big deal. And that may be the hang up with the 49ers, and they're not able to sign him. Well, he needs to realize where he is right now. You're in there with CMC, Samuel, and Kittle. You're the fourth option there. You know what I mean? Do you guys remember a long time ago when the Sabres signed Thomas Vanek, and they were like, they asked Lindy Ruff, like, why is he having such success as you know, why is Vanek scoring all these goals? And then Ruff looks at the camera and goes, well, he's on the third line. It's like,
right.
If you're the fourth option in an offense and you're successful because all these resources are being played to all these other guys, that's probably why you're good. If he realizes that maybe in 2 years, if he signs a long-term deal in Buffalo, in 2 years, he's the man, number 1A here because Diggs is gone, that's betting on yourself. These players love betting on themselves sometimes, and maybe he'll get a contract where it's pushed to the end, like a lot of these deals are, where I'll make this the first couple of years, but then when it's time for me to shine and I'm the number one, I'm going to be making number one money. So it could be one of those.
And let's not be shy about it. Josh Allen's got like a $62 million salary cap number for next year. So let's not go believing that this team is ready for not only this season, but is set up for success. Because the reality is you're far more cap strapped next year than you are this year. And it's not great this year already. So that's what I mean, right? If you're going to make a move, this is probably the offseason to do it, because when you've got a great draft, right? So the embarrassment of riches at wide receiver almost makes that free agent pool, right? Those not say middling guys, but those not exactly tier one wide receivers, it makes them a little less valuable, because teams are going to look at it and say, you know what, we're going to go into the draft. We're not going to spend a bunch of money on a player that we don't feel is a tier one. But to the point of the Bills not having money, they were going after Eric Armstead, who's 31, and he signed for 3 years, $51 million. So Buffalo was in on him, and word was they were real close. And at that money, that tells you they have more money than we think they have, or that they've shown us. I don't know where they're going to get it from. No idea.
The interesting thing, Paul, is I don't know. You may not have seen. So the numbers on Josh's restructure came out. They actually pushed the money. They actually pushed the money this year and next year.
Oh,
so
okay.
They freed up space. 13.6 this year, and then like 12 million next year they freed up, and they increased him in 26 and 27 like 11.5 each year.
Well, because when the restructure was announced, we were eating Reubens.
So it was like it was like the Mahomes restructure, not like a typical restructure, which it sounds like that may be the new norm, because they're going to have to eat at some point. You have to think an extension's coming, and they're going to kind of roll all that money in to that extension when the cap goes up.
Paul, how do retirements work? I mean, we just saw Aaron Donald retire.
Oh, that's nasty. That's
hurts the
choppy
team.
waters. Yeah, it's choppy waters. So
I'm just saying the thing that you said that they might know that we don't know is maybe Miller was like, listen, I'm going to retire at the end of next year, whether we win it or not.
Well, that
retire.
might be one of the reasons why they turned a bunch of that money into incentives, right?
Yeah.
Because let's just talk about that real quick. I think that's really important to talk about. So when you talk about player incentives, the amount of money that goes against the salary cap is based off of their prior season's production, right? So, like as an example, if Dawson Knox had in his contract that every touchdown after the 6th touchdown, he gets $200,000 for, right? If he caught 8 touchdowns the year before, then they're going to figure $40,000 in bonus money into the next year's contract, right? Into his salary cap number. If he fails to meet that, then you get that money back at the end of the season, right? It just kind of rolls up in those incentives that just turned out they weren't earned. Well, Von Miller laying in a basic egg the entire season, right, meant that a lot of money that was incentivized in his contract for performance guarantees now moved to unlikely to be earned. What Buffalo did was they took a lot of those and kind of repackaged them, right, and actually increased the amount of incentives within the year. And again, that could be more of a retirement package, right, to say, hey, listen, you earn it, great job. But the difference is that all those incentives that everybody loves to talk about, if he hits them, then it doesn't impact this year's salary cap. Impacts next year's salary cap. Now you're paying for his performance next year, plus all the contract incentives that he now is going to earn because they're going to move into likely to be earned incentives will increase that cap number as well, right? So that's where the incentive gets really tough.
That's a fun time.
Yeah. That's why when people say, "Oh, just sign him to a contract with incentives," do you really want that? Like, it helps this year, right? But if a player goes off the sheet and just blows away those incentives, you're gonna have to pay those next year against the salary cap to make up for the fact that you didn't pay for him the prior season, and all the incentives that were in the contract that were unlikely to be earned. If they're still there the next year, those are all going to be likely to be earned, and now you're going to pay for those too. So that's what I mean. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, and explain this to me too. I mean, I know I mentioned his name a little bit earlier with Aaron Donald retiring.
Yeah.
With the Rams, did the Rams do him a solid as far as like did they designate him a post June 1st so he would get all of his money from the Rams? Or
what effectively they did was they converted almost $14 million of his salary into a signing bonus, right? Okay. So that basically allows them to clear $9 million in space this year, right? And effectively what it's going to do is it's going to allow them to spread out his cap hit across 2 years. But he's going to cost them like $14 million, I think, next year for retiring this year. I think that's right. It's somewhere around there. It's a lot of money that he's going to count against the cap for having been retired for, at that point, 2 seasons.
Okay. I thought they were doing something that is rarely done by teams when a player retires. Like
that was Drew Brees. Drew Brees did the same favor. Ryan, do you remember when Drew Brees restructured his contract and basically gave New Orleans money back?
Yeah. And Wood did it too, didn't he? Didn't Eric Wood do it? He retire, and then he was like, "Oh, all right." And then they kept him on the roster, I think, until June 1st.
Yep.
Yeah, there was a lot of controversy about that. About why they did the way they did, because I think there was a lot of vitriol from Bills fans. I remember at the time where it was like, "Oh, he just restructured, now he's retiring," and then they came to find out that it was a cap mechanism. So
right.
Yeah. Paul should say incentives one more time after his rant. 100%. Yeah, I agree with that.
So Ty Johnson is back in Buffalo. I think people are a little excited about that. I like Ty Johnson as a compliment to James Cook. I'm not of the belief the Bills are done at running back, right? In this draft. I think because
in the draft.
Yeah. So because you have a lot of wide receivers, right? And people are going to be moving all over the place for wide receivers, it's going to sort of devalue some other positions. James Cook, as far as a receiving back goes, I think scared the hell out of Bills fans, for the last 4 games of the season. So are you done there, right? Or was that just the yips? Or do you have to protect yourself? We've seen Buffalo do this before, draft running backs. You just keep drafting them every year. You got enough picks to keep throwing, running backs picks at the wall. Like Pacheco was a 7th round pick. Like, you look at these things and say, let's just keep going, right?
Will you stop it? You know where he went. God. He went to Reed for crying out loud.
Okay.
I could have went in the 7th round to Reed, and I could have been productive for a year.
All right. Okay.
No, what I'm saying is he, among all the memes of Pacheco, I mean, you got to understand, like, Paul, you know as well as I do that where these guys go is a big deal. Where these guys end up is a huge deal. I mean, if Mo Lewis doesn't hit Drew Bledsoe, we never hear of Tom Brady. Come on now. I mean, all that stuff being considered.
How long ago was that? Are we getting here 20 years ago now? We're getting close to 20 years?
Yeah, more than that. What day running back? Because that's important. Obviously not day one.
Well,
but
unless
are you talking day 3?
Be the first 2 rounds, it's going to be day 3 because they don't have a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, no 3rd round pick. Yeah. I mean, I think when you take a look at sort of like the impact running backs, right? Like you, of course, have your guys that are 1st round picks. Yeah. You know, there's always 1 or 2, right? Every draft. But then you look at a player like Achane and you're like, man, that was a 3rd round pick. Like Achane's a monster. He's a monster. And that completely changes that Miami offense. Without him, they don't go anywhere, right? Nope. He is a threat. And you look at Pacheco, and Pacheco's a nice player, but he's not Achane. Achane's an animal, right? And that's a 3rd round pick. And you look at James Cook and you go, Cook ain't that, right? I like James Cook, but he's not that. He's not that guy, right? So do you keep looking? Like, is that what you do? I think you keep looking. I think you keep throwing picks at the wall, man, because so what if you cut them, right? You got 84 draft picks this year. You're cutting most of them, right? Like, isn't that the idea here? You got 84 draft picks. You're going to be cutting half of them. And you know, you lose a lot of those players because the Bills are a good team. So those are players that don't clear waivers anymore. Nick McLeod, you know, like there's a lot of Alec Anderson, right? These are all players that don't clear waivers because teams know that Buffalo, they know what they're doing, right? So that's the danger between, right? And that's a danger. And that's a danger with drafting guys when having this many draft picks, right? Like I just have to imagine that Bean is going to do a lot of moving, right? And I don't want them to leave with more than 7 players because I know you're going to lose 4 of them, right? Like even at 7, I'm not convinced that you're going to keep 3 to 4 of them, right?
So you're saying they don't draft 11?
I still think, Paul, to your point, that the strategy at running back, I still think needs to be the strategy that they employed at wide receiver. I think you need one veteran that you can count on, and they're gonna have to spend a draft pick on a rookie, and I think it's going to be earlier than maybe some Bills fans will be satisfied with because of the fact that, you know, the 7th round guys don't usually work out. The 4th round guys will sometimes work out, right? Like the 3rd, 4th round type of guys. So just kind of one name free agents wise that I don't know is going to pique your guys' interest, but I'm really interested in this team, maybe looking at like a Dante Foreman. I think that would be a nice pickup for them because he's not going to be.
You've had a fantasy hard on for Dante Foreman,
but I mean,
years. Oh, former Panther. Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. I'm unpacking it. Former Panther.
Former Panther.
Please continue. Sorry.
He's a former Panther. He's 27. He's better than average in pass protection situations, which we know Cook struggles with still, and that's a problem. And when you look at the names that are left in free agency, I mean, do any of these names excite you over Dante Foreman? I mean, like Alexander Madison, is that anything worth getting excited about at what you're going to have to pay him, which is probably more than Dante Foreman? Do you want to bring back Damian Harris? Like Cam Akers is still out there. How does that sound to you? Like there's guys like Rashad Penny, Kareem Hunt. Like those are the guys that are out there. They're going to cost you like $2-3 million a year. If Dante Foreman, if you can bring him in, he's the most attractive free agent that's still out there, in my opinion, unless you want to roll the dice on a former 1st round pick in Clyde Edwards-Helaire and think maybe you can turn him into something that he hasn't been so far in Kansas City. But I think if you go with a guy like Foreman, he brings a different dynamic than Cook. He's better than Cook is going to be in pass protection. He has fairly sure hands. And then I could absolutely see them using like a 4th round pick on like a Braylon Allen out of Wisconsin. Kid's absolutely massive if you haven't looked at him yet. 6'2", 240. Like he's a north-south guy that I think you could probably turn into a nice complement to Cook if you're looking for more of a long-term, you know, thunder and lightning type of type of format to your running back. So those are two names that I'm looking at, because I think they're going to have to do something in free agency with a veteran. Cook can't be your veteran presence in the locker room at the running back position.
No.
Yeah,
So they have to bring in a veteran. I think Foreman makes the most sense out of what's there.
Oh my God. If this were the weakest link, what a
it's kind of like we joked about it, Paul, right? Like it's king of the crap heap, right?
Is.
Like that's probably what free agent you're going to bring in at the running back position, because the fact is that all the good ones are gone. All the rest of them that are there have extremely large question marks over their head. Elvis,
Zeke Elliott,
J.K. Dobbins, like another one, right? He's another one that's got a massive. I would be surprised if DK or J.K. Dobbins is in the league again. Like he's had so many big time leg injuries that's
bad ones.
Bad ones. Well, to go back on Dante Foreman for just a second, right? So last year he was only active for 9 games because he was in Chicago. They drafted Rashawn Johnson. They had a Khalil Herbert already. He was the middle of the season.
9 games.
Yeah. So in the middle of the season, everybody was hurt. Dante Foreman comes out off the practice squad, and in 4 games he had. Let me rephrase this. In only 4 games, he had 15 or more rushes, but only once in those 4 games did he average less than 4 yards a carry, right? Which again, that's effective, right? If you're averaging 4 yards a carry in the NFL, you're an effective running back, right? That's the deal.
Right.
But he still walked away with, what do you have, like 4 touchdowns last year?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think that's the thing with him.
On a full season, he probably would have rushed for 800, 900 yards on a full season, given where he was. And he was really productive for the brief period of time that they needed him.
Yeah. I think people hear Dante Foreman and they think of Carolina Dante Foreman. And last year he was far more effective in when he was able to take on the primary role. And that, again, if you're going to bring in a veteran, you want to bring in a guy who can start should something happen to Cook.
Yep.
You hope that something doesn't, but you can't go in with Ty Johnson can't be your running back 1 if Cook goes down. Like that can't be the thing.
Right.
Because that's going to be a big detriment to the offense, because then Josh is going to have to carry the ball 15 times a game, and you don't want him to have to. You want him to be able to. There's a distinct difference between those two phrases.
Yeah, to follow up on this question from James, what round was the comp pick for Edmonds? Turned out to be a 4th.
Because he only played an 81% of snaps instead of 88% of snaps. If he would have played more snaps, I think he needed like 80 more snaps, and he would have broken the threshold for a 3rd round pick based on the way that the comp formula shook out.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, you don't like Zeke Elliott? You said a guy that has to pick up pass pro.
It's a sad list of remaining free agent running backs.
Oh, it is horrible.
It is. Oh, yeah, it's bad.
I'm here to
do an Eno Benjamin, perhaps. Like that's how bad.
Give me some Eno.
But truthfully speaking, of the list, right? Cam Akers is an incredibly talented player, but the guy's just a nightmare off the field. Apparently, like a complete nightmare off the field.
Yeah, we already got one of those.
Yeah. Oh, wait, we do.
Oh, Captain Cryptic Tweet himself.
Oh, Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. I don't care.
Not me. It's just the stuff that I hear.
Instagram. I
don't even care. Who cares? Catch the ball. That's all I care about.
That's right. Throw, catch.
Walter brings up a good point in the chat about Edmonds. He did struggle showing up when you needed him the most, and it was one last opportunity for him to not show up for the Bills when they needed him the most.
That's a good one.
Snap short of a 3rd round comp pick.
Yeah, that's funny. That's a good one.
Come short when you need him the most. That's
a good one. That's solid.
Yeah, I don't know. There was never I never got the explanation why he was only a 4th instead of a 3rd. I never understood that.
There's a comp formula that they use based on total snaps, tackles. Like there's a whole formula that goes into it.
I'm not reading that.
Yeah, I mean, there's people far smarter than me on Twitter that kind of broke it down when they released the formula, and it essentially boiled down to he was 80 points short, and you get a point for each snap that you play. So he fell 80 snaps short of the 3rd round pick.
Yeah, and that's where the comp formula gets weird, right? Because it's actually done in 2 phases. Phase 1 is when you are signing players to replace players that can eliminate you from just being in contention for getting a
Yep.
comp pick. And then once that hierarchy is established, then everybody sissy slaps each other for performance, and then whoever turns out to be the better performer is the one that turns out to get the pick. So that's
It's
the way that
great.
works.
But I mean, the comp, he played, Bean has tried to play comp pick bingo in the past, and it hasn't worked out really for him. But,
Nope.
He's playing it again this offseason with the guys that they've lost so far.
Let's go. As far as the guys that they lost and the guys they have, I'm going to share this. This was on Twitter. So if you guys
What's
can see
from
this,
our lads, that's your favorite.
shut up. No. So I'm going to take this off of there for you guys. I'm going to hide that. So, all right. What you're looking at is the prior to the Curtis Samuel, deal, but it's not. It's the current Buffalo Bills that were let go and re-signed or traded, and then there's the other ones that were retained and restructured. I can't remember who had this on Twitter. I apologize if you're watching and this is yours. I'm sorry. Anyway, so we look at it. You look at some of these names on here and what Bean was able to do with the current players that were on the team. What grade would you give him as far as looking at this list and what you see as far as some of the players that are on it?
Instantly a C for me because I absolutely hate the Josh Allen restructure. Like I was just like, you can't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. It just makes things worse down the road.
Yeah,
so
I wish they would have just
instant C
ate
for
it
me.
this year, honestly.
Yeah, it's an instant C for me. I want it to be better, right? But it's just not, because you take a look at you let go of Hardy, you let go of Hines, who granted, you traded Moss for him, so that seemed like just a straight 1-for-1, whatever. You gave Chicago back the deal that they tried to sign Ryan Bates to. So you get snarky points to me there, right? That's why it's a C and not a C minus. But it's the thing that bothered me most was the Josh restructure, right? And that's just personal opinion. I just didn't want them to do it. It didn't even matter how they did it. I just, one of these years, you're going to have to not restructure them. Just one of them, you're going to have to not do it. And I wanted it to be this year, and obviously that didn't happen.
Yeah, looking at the top myself, I mean, I was fine with Mitch Morse. Obviously, I was a cap casualty. We thought that was going to happen, but once the news of the Ryan Bates trade happened, we didn't think, no way. He's the center. The early reports are McGovern's going to move over, and then you got Edwards. So okay, that's fine. Gabe Davis was going to be too much, as Ryan says all the time. Leonard Floyd's a mercenary. He's just going to go where the money is at this point. Poyer, White, Hines, Hardy, and Neal. I mean, you had to do those. I mean, you just had to, as far as survival. What name is not on this list? Obviously because he was a free agent, and we might have to talk about this. I'm gonna close this for a second. Paul, the floor is yours. Dane Jackson.
Condolences. Can we have a moment of silence for Dane Jackson?
I will. You know what, Paul? Go ahead. Yeah, that's yours.
Oh my God! Get it off the widescreen. Nobody needs to see this. Nobody needs this hate in their life. Oh my God! I'm gonna miss you, Dane. Gonna miss you. Fucking guy. This guy.
You love that man. You love that man.
So, yeah, I'm gonna miss Dane Jackson. I really am. I heard Levi Wallace rumors again. Is that anybody else here in Levi Wallace?
Stop it.
There are Levi Wallace rumors. Yes.
Yeah, see, I knew it. The band's getting back together. What's Robert Foster doing?
You know what's funny? The snarky things that you talk about, what they did with with the whole Chicago thing. The Rasul Douglas thing was funny because we immediately knew what they did because he already had voided years built in.
Yeah.
So they're like, let's just put the money in the voided years. It's already there.
Yeah, that's right.
But shifting over to the defensive side of the ball, and I want to get the chat's take on this as well as you guys. I'm going to start with Ryan and then go with Paul. Ryan, indicators are that after the Buffalo Bills go wide receiver in the first round, they probably should go safety. And it's another position, kind of like the running back position, where you want to have some veteran leadership back there. They already, they locked up Rapp. My point is this, and I wanted Jordan Fuller just for this specific reason, is the fact that when the Rams won the Super Bowl, Taylor Rapp and Jordan Fuller accounted for over 200 tackles as the starting pair back there. But Rapp was the free safety that year. I love him more as a free safety rather than a strong safety. Now, I know in the Buffalo Bills defense, sometimes they're interchangeable, but we all knew for the past 7 years, the torpedo was Poyer and Hyde was the center fielder. I think Rapp needs to be the center fielder to be the most effective. Could he play Poyer's role? Yes. However, I like him more as a free safety. Do you champion the fact of the Buffalo Bills taking a safety? Or is it something like the running back position where you got to get a veteran in there and then you can take one on day 3?
Yeah, I think it's probably the latter. I think Paul mentioned the Eric Armstead in on. There's a name out there at safety that I think a lot of Bills fans would probably be pretty happy if they shifted their attention to that. Justin Simmons is still out there as a true free safety who's going to command that type of money.
Yeah.
So if they were in on Eric Armstead, I don't know why they now wouldn't shift to be in on Justin Simmons. You know,
31.
the other names that are out there from a free safety position, like a true free safety position, don't really do a lot for me. Like Eddie Jackson, maybe Condre Diggs, he's out there. You know, and I probably, if I'm a Bills fan, wouldn't necessarily set aside the fact that Micah Hyde could come back, right? Like at the end of the day, Micah Hyde very well could come back as a veteran presence in this team if they can say, hey, listen, we're not going to put you into a situation where you're going to get hurt again. We need you to come in, act as like a coach on the field type of thing. We want you to come in at a team-friendly deal. Bean has been very good over his time as a GM of giving guys a number, telling them to go out to the market, and just saying this number is not going anywhere, right? I think we saw that last season with Jordan Poyer. They gave him a number. They sent him out into the marketplace. They signed Rapp. Poyer came back and was like, hey, remember you told me that deal was still there. Now I want it. And I think that's when we've talked about that before, Paul. Like that's why we think Poyer was on the roster again, was because they had told him that the deal's there if you want it. They signed Rapp. Then Poyer came back and said, okay, I want it. And they're like, well, we got to honor this because we told him we would honor it and player first. So all that said, don't be surprised if a Micah Hyde comes back. I think there's a lot of pride out there for Micah Hyde, but at the end of the day, you're a 33-year-old safety. If you haven't retired yet, chances are you're looking for a job, and maybe Buffalo's the best spot for you. So, but what a Simmons gives you, if they do wind up paying for a guy like Simmons, what that gives you, Mario, is that flexibility to say, we got a lot of work to do on our offensive line after this year. Like we need to use one of these first 2 picks on an offensive lineman. It's not sexy. It's not going to make the headlines, not necessarily going to make everybody happy. But at the end of the day, you know, you re-sign Deion Dawkins because you cannot go into next season with a problem at your offensive line. Like if the McGovern-Edwards experiment doesn't work out and they hadn't extended Dawkins, you could be going into 2025 with Osiris Torrance and 4 holes. Right? Like that was a realistic possibility for them if they didn't extend Deion Dawkins. So I think they do have to do something with their first 2 picks, one at the wide receiver, one at the offensive line position, and a veteran safety that's going to come in and can play every snap. I think has to be a priority for that because it's really the only position that's left. It's safety, it's offensive line, and it's wide receiver that are glaring needs on this team. So one has to be addressed through a big-time free agent. 2 of them have to be done through the draft. So I think that's kind of where they're at this point.
I am going to respectfully disagree with Ryan, and here's why.
You don't do respectfully anything.
So. That's fair. So the Bills obviously signed Nicholas Morrow, and everybody goes like kind of like a dog that heard a new noise. Like, what? Huh? Wait, you signed a real middle linebacker? Like, what's that for? So. Thank God. What are you doing? But the fact of the matter is, right, Buffalo is one of the few teams. I understand trends are trends. Buffalo lived on 3 safeties this year. And I think at times you saw how Kansas City picked you apart, right? And you can't let that happen again. And that was primarily because you were running 3 safeties. It's just the way that was, right? Like Kansas City had 5 third down attempts that whole playoff game. So they were effective against you. Your defense was absolutely depleted, but you add in Morrow, which I think is really fascinating. And what to me it does is it says that you don't need to add 2 safeties, right? Because Micah Hyde could come back. You're absolutely right. I don't think you're necessarily done there, But Terrell Edmonds is a free agent, former first-round pick, same agent as Tremaine Edmonds, right? So you've already got that established relationship there. Terrell went and only played, I think, like less than 40% of snaps in Tennessee, had a really terrible year. Probably looking to reestablish. Buffalo's a great place for safety value, man, because you're going to get playing time and you're going to get featured. So that to me makes a lot of sense because of, the player first thing that Ryan was just talking about. That one makes sense to me. That feels like a family move, right? The twin brother of Tremaine. But the other side of that coin is Buffalo actually looking at a defensive change and going 3 linebackers? Does it really force your hand, right? Because if I'm going to sign Terrell Edmonds, I think I'm good, right? Former first round pick, like he checks all the boxes that Buffalo will take a deal on a guy for, and he's still out there. It's a abysmal safety market, yet he's still out there. And I don't think he's going to command all that much money because he had a really, 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 really awful year. The only other person that kind of like raises my radar is Justin Simmons, and that's just going to be a lot of money, man. I just don't see that happening. I get it, right? I get it, but I'd rather re-sign Hyde than sign Justin Simmons.
I think the Armstead thing signals the fact that they understand that they cannot fill every spot in free agency through reclamation projects, right? Like they have to go get proven commodities at a certain point.
Agreed. You really say Terrell Edmonds is a reclamation project? Like the guy played.
I don't know if you can call him. I don't know if you can refer to him as a former first round pick who had a terrible, awful, abysmal season last year, and not also think that that's probably a reclamation project.
One season, right? He in 5 previous seasons, he had only played under 92% of snaps once, and it is because he missed a game. Like that's what I mean, right? If you're going to put your money on a safe bet, like that feels like a safe bet to me. Tennessee was dog shit last year. Let's just be honest.
And he got packaged into Philly.
No, he didn't.
No, you're talking Kevin Byard.
That was Kevin. Yeah.
No, that the Edmonds was the trade.
No, it was Baird. Ryan's right.
They traded for each other. You okay?
Are you okay?
You're talking about the Terrell Edmonds, the safety.
Yeah.
Was traded to Philly.
No, he wasn't. Oh, shit. Look at that. Signed a 1-year deal with Philly in March of 2023. Oh, all right then.
Mario was right. Holy shit, Mario was right.
Moving on.
I remember that trade. I was just about to make the counterpoint of, do you really want a guy in who has played for 3 teams in 6 years? And I was going to be like, yeah, that's kind of a reclamation project.
I wasn't quite sure where Paul was going as he got to his point, because he was like, well, they're not going to play.
Well, he'll be cheap.
I'm like, well, yeah, but they're not going to go from 3 to 1, so they still have to sign a safety. And he's like, well, I think they should sign a safety and probably a veteran. And I'm like, not following with it. I just don't think
they're going to spend big money on a safety. That was sort of my larger point, right? Because to me, Edmonds is a more safe bet in the free agent market than Marcus May or like any of these other guys. So, and I'll be honest, guys, drafting a safety, Buffalo's done that like a few times.
Hasn't worked. No,
I'm not in love with any of it. Right. So Buffalo, just like you don't trust Buffalo to draft a receiver, I don't really trust Buffalo to draft a safety. Right. I don't.
They go receiver safety 1-2.
Oh God, put me on a boat and light it on fire.
But they don't miss on those. They miss on the later round picks for those players. Now you want to say, oh, was Gabe Davis a miss? Was Isaiah Hodges a miss? No, not necessarily. They were quality starters for the Buffalo Bills. Oh, well, one of them was.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you guys. Now, one mention of Justin Shorter tonight. I'm so proud of you guys.
Yeah, no.
In that he was taller than 6 foot. But
with the Hollins point. Yeah,
I did come to defend him. Admittedly, I did come to defend him because Ryan said
that we don't have of the largest free agent signing of the off seasons thus far, guys. Mitchy Biscuits is back. They have a legitimate backup quarterback again. Can we appreciate that for a minute? Mitch Biscuits back in Buffalo Blue. How excited are you guys about that?
Paul, can you do me a favor too? Other than the Mitchy Biscuits, I love that Mitch Trubisky and Matt Hack were the first two announcements by the Buffalo Bills as signings.
They know
in this
exactly what
free
they're
period.
doing. They know what they're doing.
Paul, and for the people that are in here, could you smash that like button? That lets YouTube know this is a good video or a funny one, whatever you think it is. But Paul, can you do me a favor and explain to Hashtag Nation Bills Mafia, and you guys spread the word on this, okay? Please, for me and Paul and Ryan.
God,
Everyone's like, why?
Say right now.
Why did they re-sign Matt Hack? And Paul knows the reason why.
Oh, he's left-handed.
There we go. Thank you, guys. That's all you need to say when somebody says, why did they re-sign Matt Hack? It's for Tyler Bass.
He's left-handed. Yeah.
He's left-handed. Look at the history.
Well, yeah, look at Brandon Beane and punters. Left-handed, like they're left-handed. He wants the dominant hand for a right-footed kicker. They're all left-handed.
That's what they do.
Daniel makes a good point in the chat that Paul, they did miss the opportunity to bring back AJ McCarron. Yeah. And Mario, I can't believe you're not defending the Bills drafting wide receivers. Like, they just had one that they drafted that just played in the Super Bowl, right?
Ray
McLeod, man.
Yeah, he did awesome too, didn't he?
Yeah, that was
nice fumble.
That ball hit the turf so fast. Like you've been working on it all off.
This was like at that game, right? Mario wasn't like a week before that. We were arguing about whether we could call him a miss or not because he's still in the league after the Bills drafted him.
He certainly missed.
So Nicky G brings up a comment. Let's talk about it. Worried about him being Crowder 2.0. Crowder was an injury issue. Samuel certainly comes with a laundry list of the nagging injuries, right? So what would you guys need for Samuel to be considered a success? And what's the line on him being a bust, like just a bad signing? Because Crowder was exactly that, right? Crowder had all the makings to be a good signing. Emmanuel Sanders at first had all the makings to be a good signing. And I think once you got to the other side of those deals, you looked at it and said, man, I really wish we didn't spend that money there, right? Not that Crowder was a lot of money, but where's the line for you where you're calling Curtis Samuel a success versus Curtis Samuel, what a bust?
Well, I think we need to look at, if we're going numerically on this one, Paul, he has he averages in his 7-year career around 70 targets a year.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'd probably be a nice number for him as far as that goes. 70 targets, maybe 40.
But is that a soft number?
Yeah, I mean, like 45, 50 catches out of him would be like what you would expect out of him, being probably the fourth option in this offense and what he's doing. And maybe the real value of him isn't going to be over the long-term numbers of, he's going to have 850 yards or he's going to have 12 touchdowns. He's going to have one or two solid, if he has one or two, maybe three solid first downs a game that extends the drive, you get your value out of the guy. I really think you get the value out of the guy. And then if for some reason Diggs goes down for a game or two, you're not completely hitting the panic button because, as I agree with these two gentlemen here, you're going to have a first-round receiver and Curtis Samuel and Shakir if Diggs goes down for like maybe 2 or 3 games. Like you have that insurance there. You know what I mean? So I don't think the long-term numbers of touchdowns, receptions, and stuff like that is going to be the biggest thing. I think he's gonna make some plays for you this year that you otherwise wouldn't have had made for you by Gabe Davis. So I think it's an upgrade for you. That's I don't know. What do you think, Ryan?
I don't see the injury concern that I think other folks see in Curtis Samuel. Like,
as a former Curtis Samuel fantasy owner, he was captain day to day, and it was the most frustrating thing I've ever seen.
That's fine, but as a fellow Curtis Samuel dynasty owner, like he missed all but 5 games in 2021. Other than that, 2023, he played 16 games, 2022, 17 games, 2020, 15 games, 2019, 16 games.
It's not about the total number of games. It's a snap count thing.
I understand that.
I think that's where
he was still 90 targets or more in all 4 of the seasons that he played the entire season, right? So it's like, it's you can't have it both ways. He's either an injury concern or he didn't play in every single game and average 90 targets a season. Like, you can't, it's not, both things can be true at the same time. So either he was oft injured to the point where he didn't practice and then he still showed up on game day, which is awesome. Like, that's the kind of guy you want on your team, or he was injured a lot. But the stats to me don't show that he was injured a lot. Like there's hurt and there's injured. I think he's a guy that gets hurt a lot. I just don't think that he's a guy that gets injured a lot. And
there was
that's,
only
again,
one
two different
season
things.
where he played, 2 seasons, 2 seasons where he played more than 70% of your snaps on offense. So it doesn't matter what the target total is.
But was that health
matter.
or was that usage? Because if he's only playing 70% of the snaps, again, that doesn't typically equate to 90 targets as a third option. It just doesn't. So
if you go and start diving in, you'll see there are games where he has like 14 targets, right?
Yeah.
And then the next game he'll have 2, right?
Yeah.
Like this. That's what I mean. It's a snap count thing. You can look at the total number of targets on the aggregate, but the fact of the matter is they don't divide evenly, because he'd go out and have 14 targets in a game and then the next game have 2 and play 17% of snaps that game, right?
I mean, it kind of sounds like you're talking about Diggs last season, but he was out there for every snap, which is fine. But there were games where he had 17 targets and there were games where he had 4. And that was a problem, right? That was a usage problem, not a snap count problem. So, I mean, I think, again, if you're looking at Curtis Samuel to be a 90% of your snap counts, he's not going to be that. But they don't have a guy on the roster who is that anymore. And there are not a lot of wide receivers in the NFL that are that in today's day and age. Like there's just so many personnel groupings or so many different ways that they use these guys. For me, if Curtis Samuel comes in and he plays almost every game, right? Maybe misses a couple of games here and there, and he gets to 70 targets, 40 catches for 500 yards and a few touchdowns, I think that's a successful signing, because I fully expect him, and he should be like the 4th option in this offense, the way that things work out, 5th if you count Josh as an option. So I think what he's done in his career versus what I think they're bringing him in to do, I'll be happy with him if he's a legitimate 4th option for this team and moves the chains a few times, carries the ball, runs jet sweeps, brings some versatility to your offense. I think that will be a successful signing, because it's something they've missed, oddly enough, since McKenzie left. Even though I didn't think McKenzie was very good at that to begin with, but they really tried, right? And they've tried to replace him since then. And I think Samuel is probably that attempt at replacing that type of player in this offense.
To me, the number's 50 touches, right? Because Samuel's a guy that has come in the past, and in half the number of seasons that he's played has over 100 yards rushing 3 times, right? So again, to me, it's a total number of touches thing. In Washington in 2022, he ended up having 38 rushing attempts for 187 yards. Like that's a lot, guys, from the wide receiver position, right? But that just tells you, like, even in Carolina, he had 41 rushing attempts one season. He ended up with 200 yards rushing on the season. So to me, it's
the year Brady had
number. That's the year Brady had him, right?
Yeah.
That to me, it's a total number of touches thing. It's not about targets. It's not even about snap count, right? It's a total number of touches things. If he gets 50 touches in this offense, then this is a reasonable signing, right? Because you couldn't get Deontay Hardy 50 looks all season, right? So if you can get Samuel 50 touches, then I think that at that point, does it really justify the money that you're spending on him? I don't think so, right? But the free agent market, you're often going to overpay, especially when you're looking for a specific skill set in the market. So again, 50 total touches is the line for me. If he's over that, good signing. If he's below that, it wasn't a good signing. It's very cut and dry to me. But I don't expect to see him play more than 55% of snaps on this offense. I'm with Ryan. If people are saying that this guy's going to play 80+% of snaps, no, he's not. He's not going to. It's not going to happen. And you have to look at every snap that he takes past the line of scrimmage is a snap that you're not going to have for Shakir. And I know that's going to piss Bills fans off. Right? It's going to happen. It's going to piss Bills fans off.
Yeah, well, but the thing about it is, what I like is we've seen how this offense operates under Dable. We've seen how it operated under Dorsey. And now you have Samuel. So people want to always just put him immediately into, oh, he's the McKenzie guy, or he's the Hardy guy, or he's going to be that guy. Beasley or Crowder or whatever the heck they want to do. I think what it does, the biggest thing about the Samuel signing, is that it adds an element to your offense that wasn't there before and that you haven't utilized over the past 10, 12 games that you had last year. So to me, it's a successful signing already with no games even being played. for the fact that you're adding an element to your offense that wasn't there that teams have to prepare for now.
Mhm.
It's not that they already didn't have enough trouble dealing with the Buffalo Bills offense. Now you inject Samuel, and then we haven't even hit the draft yet. So it's these new things that we talked about it all the time on the defensive side of the ball, Paul, and we would go back and forth. This incumbent defense that you had for years and years, you have to mix things up because there's tendencies that your players have now. Well, what's this offense doing now? It's mixing things up. It already mixed its lineup. You're mixing the receiver up now.
Mhm.
You're doing a bunch of different things. And post-draft, we'll be able to get a better look at what happens with this offense and what direction they may go, because you may want to put Samuel in that category of a McKenzie or whatever, but this is uncharted waters for us now. He might not be used like that at all because this is Brady's playbook now. It's not Dable's or Dorsey's. So I'm interested to see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. It's this offseason has me, a bit more confused as far as like overall offensive direction, because it just seems like, the positive traction that you were making, right? You're hitting the reset button on the wide receiver position completely, right? Like it's an interesting year. That's all I can say about it, right? It's an interesting year. And we're not even talking about the defensive side of the football. And you've got a 30-year-old Rasul Douglas that everybody's thrilled with, right? It's in no free safety, and you're like, oh, everything's fine.
What McDermott was able to do last year.
A.J. Epenesa's back. Like, what universe is this? We're talking about that.
You hate him so much.
I don't hate him, but I am worried about the fact that he was really good in like really short periods of time. And now you're just hitching your wagons to the AJ Epinesa train, right? Like you traded Boogie Basham. Wouldn't mind having Boogie back.
I mean,
not that he was great.
Yeah. AJ balled out for you.
I would have rather had Boogie than Shaq Lawson. Ryan. He wasn't even paying attention.
I hope he's glad that Shaq Lawson's not back before the offseason's over.
Might be.
No.
They need tight end or defensive end depth.
Well, that's not the reason why you said he was going to be on the Bills. You said the reason he was going to be on the Bills is because he's that scrapper that'll throw punches.
They need a nasty guy on the defense.
Can we all love the fact that Daquan Jones is back too?
Oh,
32-year-old Daquan Jones.
That was huge for them. That's such a huge signing.
Yeah, I loved it. Well,
Sebastian Joseph Day.
Yeah, we heard he's coming in for a visit. Yeah, that should be good.
Who is this?
Sebastian Joseph Day from the Rams.
You'd have to imagine they'd be real interested in re-signing him right now. That now that
he's in Buffalo, he's not in LA. So it's like the old Mario Williams. Don't let him leave town.
Yep.
Make sure you pay his taxes in his contract.
That's a thing, guys.
That is a thing.
That's a thing.
All right. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen of Hashtag Nation Bills Mafia, thank you for joining us as we tried to cut up what the heck was going on at One Bills Drive with some of these players. Hopefully we'll set your mind at ease with a few things. Make sure you hit up our link tree that has our TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook on it. All shows will be on iTunes and Spotify. Special shout out to our sponsor, Mr. Rogers Homes. For Paul and Ryan, I am Mario. We are out of here.
Hello, fellow Bills fans. Sean Rogers, realtor and lead of the Mr. Rogers Homes team. Did you know that real estate is one of the best ways to build wealth, and right now is one of the best times to own an investment property in Arizona? Please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions so we can take the next step to your financial freedom here in the Valley of the Sun, utilizing real estate. As always, God bless America and go Buffalo!